Okay, so this short thing is about information to be found on stamps, and at least in North America, Mexico, Canada, the United States, most of the information you get on a stamp is correct and you can depend on it. However, things do change and things become obsolete. Some things don't change. Washington was and will always be our first president. Lincoln was 16, and that man, FDR, you can you can stick with them. This is reliable information on U.S. stamps. However, things do change. This is the sheet from the 1976 Bicentennial issue of state flags. And if you were to use this, I don't know why anyone would, but if you were to use this as background information for something you were doing right now, in many cases, you would be putting false information out there because state flags change. And they change often. It's really quite surprising. The whole idea of a state flag really got into American circulation in the 1890s. Before that, states had seals. Of course, they did because they had to stamp certain uh, paperwork with them to make it legal. But the idea of a state flag flying over a post office or something like that, that was entirely discretionary. And as I say, the idea began to catch on in the 1890s. I think one of the great impetuses was the lost cause movement in the Old South, where people were trying to retain, or in fact, even sort of invent new symbols of the Confederacy and the perfect way of life that had been lost, destroyed by the Yankees. Here's an example. This is the state flag of Utah in 1976. And it looks very much like many other state flags, particularly with the dark blue background. And the symbols on it are typical of American iconography. The bald eagle, the American flag, the name of the state, two dates, not one, but two. You get more for your money with Utah. The 47 refers to the fact that that was the year that the Mormons arrived in the Great Salt Valley. And 1896 refers to the year Utah became a state. Interestingly enough, if you know American history, the Mormons were intent on founding their own country. They did not go west to settle territory in the expectation that they would merge into the other states. But the United States was not about to permit any independent country anywhere between Boston, Philadelphia, and San Francisco Bay. So Utah was sort of against its will absorbed into the Union as a territory. This is the flag of Utah now. You'll notice that the dates are gone, the words are gone, the eagle is gone, the flags are gone. It's very abstract. What remains is the beehive, which they, on the old flag, was indicated a symbol of industry. Certainly, the Mormons are an industrious people, and they've kept the beehive. That is sort of the symbol of Utah in many contexts. But this is what the flag looks like now, and it's really quite a change.
I was wondering about the shapes. Is that supposed to be mountains? They're
I think
advertising that they're mountains.
that's what I take them to be. Yeah.
Then you got a lone star there, which would confuse you with Texas, maybe.
Phil, you're right. The stars do have meaning on these state flags. This one I cannot explain. So if you were looking at the 1976 bicentennial issue, you would have the wrong idea of what the flag of Utah is like today. By the way, statehood anniversaries have long been celebrated on United States stamps. The movement began, as far as I can tell, in the 1930s. American commemoratives in the 20s very often referred back to the Revolutionary War era because that was 150 years since many of those things happened. And some of those incredibly beautiful black and red stamps from the 1920s were referring to various battles and agreements and so on and so forth. By the 1930s, they began to issue stamps on significant anniversaries of states joining the Union. And this is a sampling of them there. On the top, it's Vermont, and I believe that's Wisconsin. I'm sorry the picture's so small. My scanner is. So the middle is Tennessee. That's Andy Jackson there, of course. Next to that is Kentucky. I guess that's a Daniel Boone type figure. In the bottom, you see that this is celebrating Texas's centennial of joining the Union. In this case, they did put the Texas state flag on the stamp. By and large, they didn't when these issues came out. And this series of anniversaries and commemorations continues even to this day. We did what's it called, the 200th anniversary of Maine recently. Maine joined the Union in 1820 as part of the Missouri Compromise. Up to that point, it had been part of Massachusetts. Anyway, back to state flags as depicted on the bicentennial stamps. This was news to me. South Dakota at one point called itself the Sunshine State. I didn't know that. They have yielded the slogan to Florida, and Florida uses it all the time now. Interestingly enough, the stamp on the left is the old South Dakota flag as depicted on the bicentennial series. The one to the right is much busier and seems to be going in the opposite direction of what Utah has done. Mm-hmm. The flag is now a lot busier, and they've included the state seal in the middle of the sun. And they call themselves the Mount Rushmore State. There is of course, graphic artists are interested in this kind of field, and the movement in recent years has been to make a flag as identifiable as possible at a distance. And so when I pointed out that the Utah flag had a blue background, so do about 9 other states, and at a distance you might not be able to tell what flag that was. I mean, it wouldn't probably make any difference in your life, but the most notorious changes made to state flags, of course, involve the elimination of references to the Confederacy.
It bears an uncanny resemblance to the Confederate national flag, whereas the one on the right was the Confederate battle flag.
Absolutely true. Yep. The Confederacy actually had 3 different national flags in its 4.5 years of existence. And one of them, the middle period, looked very much like the flag on the right. That's absolutely true. Now, here's an instance where the stars do have significance, and I can mention what it is. There were 11 states in the Confederacy. Why then are there 13 stars on the old Georgia flag and in the stars and bars? The Confederates, they were secession conventions were held in Missouri and Kentucky, and they stayed with the Union. There was a lot of military force in effect, particularly in Missouri, of course. However, there were, I'm thinking of the term, alternate facts. There were alternate conventions that were held in 2 states, and they declared their intention to join the Confederacy. The Confederacy recognized representatives from Missouri and from Kentucky in their Congress. And so you're absolutely right. That's why there are 2 extra stars on the stars and bars and in this Georgia flag representing Missouri and Kentucky, which the Confederacy claimed had been more or less stolen from them by the Northerners. If you look at the new flag, there are 13 stars still. Now, I don't know if that is, I think that's purposely ambiguous. You can
Oh,
say, well,
yes.
13 stars because there were 13 original colonies.
Right.
But there were also 13 stars on the stars and bars. So anyway, I won't go any further with Georgia, but a similar case, of course, is in Mississippi. Again, that's the old flag to the left, as depicted on the bicentennial issue. And there's the new flag on the right, with the symbol of Mississippi, the magnolia. They've also added words. In God we trust. Okay, that's the feeling down in Mississippi right now. In this case, there are 20 stars on the flag. Can anyone guess what that represents?
The 20th state that they in this union.
Absolutely right. Massachusetts is still considering changing its flag. This is a long paragraph I've copied from YouTube. The gist of it is that the deadline that the commission set for itself has passed, and they're not going to change. So, as depicted on the bicentennial stamp issue, this image remains correct. The objections to it were manifold, and in a liberal state like Massachusetts, they came from all directions. And so my question is, if they're going to change these state flags, what's next? The state birds? Are they going to start changing them? I don't know. And I have one brief suggestion, and that is that if they are going to do that, here's what I recommend for New York.